This episode of the AI XR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zappar. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zappar comes in. They built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next-gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the Three.js rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to Zappar.com and see what they can do for you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz for the AI XR podcast. It's Friday, August 1st, 2025. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
So it is the dog days of summer, as they say. So not a big news week, but a great guest. My old AOL colleague, who I haven't talked to for 30 years, but he's a great guy, Greg Shove, CEO of Section. Prior to Section, he founded 5 companies. He had 3 exits. He is a graduate of the Stanford School of Business. Greg Shove is in business with Scott Galloway now, running one of his companies. I'm really interested in hearing about that. You know, I'm a Galloway fanboy. So Galloway's so overexposed. Let me just say, so in case he's listening. Sorry, Scott. He's so overexposed. He should be running for office if he's not.
Well, isn't our podcast sneaking up on Kara and Scott now? Or,
yeah. We're flirting with Sway.
I thought we passed
100.
Kara. Didn't we pass Kara?
We can't. Yeah, but you bounce around in the
momentarily.
Yeah, we passed her for a second. We were bouncing around right now between like 75 and 50. And I keep trying to capture it and screenshot our rank when it's really low. I got that one at 53 where we were ahead of Sway, which I thought, nah, we're not that good.
It was a blip. A blip.
Well, so I sent Kara a note, no word back. I think she may be busy doing other things.
No comment, huh? Interesting.
So, anyway, this was a slow week, but, there were a lot of interesting earnings news, and, you know, big tech continues its tear. Kind of funny because everybody is announcing huge, like multi-billion-dollar investments, and all the money's going to NVIDIA.
Well, company store theoretical, right? So this is back to the gold rush days where you got to have the picks and shovels, and they make the picks and shovels. But I did notice that Microsoft flirted a day or two with getting very close to their $4 trillion valuation. I don't know if it quite hit it. I think it got to the 39 something kind of range. So at some point they will crack that. And Microsoft, Apple seems to be drifting down. They'll probably come back a little bit. It's kind of interesting summertime, you know, for the big tech stuff.
If you pull big tech out of the equation, you know, the optics are to the educated class and the kind of tech snobs who listen to our show, you know, that the economy is doing great. Because that's our view, right? Like right in front of our eyes is
our myopic view.
Big tech, which is doing great. But if you took that out of the S&P 500, if you took that out of the NASDAQ, the economy would look very meh. And I think most people, 75% of the people, 80% of the people are seeing meh and thinking, what the hell are those guys talking about? Boom times in video? What the hell? You know, so it's really interesting. And, you know, a lot of people feel like, you know, the results of the last election are the results of there being 2 worlds, right? There's one reality, but we're looking at it from opposite sides and not seeing the same thing. Like one person, it's blind people, right? One's holding the tail of the elephant, one's holding the trunk, and they have a completely different view of what the animal that they're holding.
Tony has a thesis. He's got
Yeah. So here's I actually had a university president at our company yesterday. So we were talking about this very topic. So what's really interesting is that there's a power curve of intelligence and understanding of where the world of technology is. And there's a political power curve where they want to dumb people down. If you think about the dumbing down, don't go to university, don't be educated. Education's for stupid people. So stupid people want to feel like I don't need to get smarter. What does that do? That creates a gigantic class of people who do not have the skills to participate in the technology economy. And then they're watching a small group of people who do go to school, who study hard, who work hard in tech, like zoom past them, and they're wondering why that's happening. But you got to ask, why are certain leaders telling you you don't need math, you don't need science, you don't need to believe in any of that, you don't need to like get educated in tech or physics, and none of that's real. And what does that land you? That lands you a no job or a very low paying job. And they're promising you by blocking immigrants from Mexico, somehow miraculous jobs will appear, which is completely not true. Like that, a person coming here who wants to like go to school and work hard is not, going to, allow you, if you don't go to school and work hard, to have a job at NVIDIA or at Apple or at Microsoft. So there's a complete lie going on to a lot of folks. So the power curve is that the NVIDIAs are 4 trillion and they're going to go to 10 and 20. And a huge class of folks will not understand what's happening. But when they try to make sense of it, someone tells them a narrative is like people coming from another country are doing it to you. This is a country whose headquarters is the United States. And it's filled with people who did not listen to that lie, who go to school, who studied math, who worked 18 hours a day and learned how to program and got a job and built companies like that. So when does the reality of what's happening enter the minds of people who are fed narratives that are not real and have nothing to do with their own situation? That's the real problem. The other issue is if you don't learn analytic thinking, if you can't read books, if you cannot process complex thoughts, you have no place in that future world. Now, here's the scary thing. You've got people like Jensen, CEO and founder of NVIDIA, telling you, we don't need software engineers anymore. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. So that creates an even larger underclass of people that have no jobs, that don't go to school, that don't learn these things, because that means they could slurp up more of that economy. Does that make any sense? So how do you wake up people to say, I have to study hard. I need to become a system thinker. I need to learn science. I have to stop listening to people that don't have my best interests. The only thing in your best interest is pick yourself by your boots, go to school, learn physics, learn engineering, learn how to code, learn a real useful future tech skill, or you're wondering why you don't have a job and then you're in this Ready Player One future. That was my diatribe for Friday, but it's very interesting when you sit back and go, why are folks here telling people not to go to school, telling people not to be educated? It's so the educated people are taking more and more of the work. But if you're listening, just go to school, get that job, learn how to code, learn tech. It's open to you. And it's not someone coming to this country taking that job away. You're taking your own job away. If you don't go to school and learn that skill, you will not get that job. It's like if you don't play basketball every day, you're not going to get like drafted by the Bulls. And then when you're wondering why is someone playing for the Bulls, because they practice 18 hours a day, every day, their whole life. That's why they got that job.
So I'm going to tell you.
Sorry for that diatribe.
That was actually a great diatribe. I enjoyed that. So for a slow summer Friday, that was
like,
I gave you an A+. All
right.
But I'm going to talk about one of my students for a second.
Okay.
Somebody about whom I'm very fond and is going to graduate school for computer science and having kind of a hard time, and is discouraged because of AI. And so much of what they're learning can be done by AI. To which I said, the winners are going to be programmers who are really good, who are going to be great and 10 times as fast. But you can't do that prompting and you can't structure that AI's work and you can't evaluate that AI's work unless you are a really great programmer. Right?
Correct.
Because otherwise, how can you evaluate the quality of the work? How would you even know what you were looking at? And by the way, all of the code that it puts out still has to be compiled and tested. And so, I mean, of course we're going to need programmers. Yes, there may not be as many of them on each project or in each company, but it doesn't mean those skills aren't critical. But I want to go to the idea of
Charlie, can I just jump on that for a second?
Why are we investing? What would happen if we took $70 billion and instead of investing it in let's say, a defense or a border related purpose. We used it for education. And maybe we used it in education where we actually underwrote people's education. We gave them a grant so they could live while they go to school, right? Because the obstacle to going to school is not just tuition, which is very high, but if you're taking a full-time course load, it's not practical to work full-time.
Well, we've all seen many administrations of that ideal that attempts to rise to the surface and then gets knocked down, right? The more progressive, more forward-thinking, more liberal administrations tend to drive a larger education platform, lower the cost, lower the barriers to entry. And we've watched that. Like when we think about the three of us at our age range and our generational experience, the three of us and many people that we know in our circles were raised in the advancement and growth of the middle class in the United States. The United States became the lighthouse of the world in terms of the have and have nots were actually flattening out, right? This was in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then in the mid 80s, something changed. And then it changed and it changed and it changed again. And for someone that has traveled a lot around the world, I've witnessed and seen other cultures. Probably the most dramatic would be to go to India and you see a precursor to what is happening in the United States, to what Roni's point is, where there is almost no middle class. There's a tiny little sliver of the massive wealth earners, and then there's a mass of extraordinarily under-resourced people, right, that are essentially living with almost nothing. And they use the politics of the day and religion of the day and power of the day uses that power dynamic to keep that little sliver riding very high and everybody else riding quite low. United States is entering into that zone with our current political climate. I don't know if you guys agree with that. Roni, if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, but there's a way to reverse it, which is if you teach kids now, wherever you are, like elementary, middle, high school, you have to be a system thinker. As Charlie said, to understand the output of competing systems, you need to know more, not less, to supervise them. We need more people who could supervise them to create 10x companies. That's what you should be doing. You should be learning all those skills and more. You should learn management and system thinking. We need to create like generations of like super bright system thinking, management capable, innovative people. That's what we need.
Instead of a national mandate for kicking people out of the country, let's have a national mandate where we spend $80 billion on education.
Do you think that can work? A question to the two of you guys. Do you think that can work primarily with a public model or a public-private model, or does it exist with both a public and a private model, or is the public model too large and too broken to affect that change?
Could I throw this out? If you look at post-World War II, the U.S. was bold, invested heavily in all sorts of infrastructures and DARPA, and created like a renaissance, like a golden age, and we embraced universities, research, everything was like in full bloom.
Airports, highways.
So why are we ignoring what made America great?
Yes.
Immigrants,
those things
investment
are crumbling
in education.
in front of us. Those things are crumbling in front of us, and it occurs to absolutely no one to say maybe we should invest in them.
but the problem is you have two sides. Neither one is arguing for that. The actual greatness of the United States is embracing immigrants and embracing building up a high education system and investing more than anyone in the world in science and research. Greatness is not blocking immigrants and dumbing down the country. That is like the road to ruin. And somehow people are believing that and they're going down like this like path of road to ruin. We have to become highly educated, invest in science and research, bring the best and brightest of the country, and it'll have remarkable effects. If you think like a CEO of a tech company, you want the smartest people in the world in your company. You want to upskill them. You want to invest heavily in research. Companies that hire the least smart people, that dumb them down and get rid of innovation technology, they're gone. Why are we doing the things that no company would ever do? Why are people going along with that? It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, the flip side is not to be a socialist country. Like both sides are fundamentally wrong. They don't, like neither side is addressing why this country rose in like capability and technology and science and led the world. It was not being socialist. It's not being fascist. It's embracing science and research and education and bringing the best and brightest here. That's why all these people want to come here, to be part of that.
And if you think about that embrace, right, and somehow
we're hugging people.
Our collective memories are quite short because Silicon Valley was that, right? It was not created by private industry initially. It was created by government-driven programs, military and
DARPA.
Yeah. And that's the reason that we have that economic wealth now that is largely privatized, but it didn't start out as private enterprise, right? So
look at NVIDIA. Jensen's family or Jensen came here from another country.
Yes.
Steve Jobs, his father, I think, was originally from Syria.
Syrian.
So like some of the biggest, most important companies, like Sergey was an immigrant, right? Some of the biggest companies in the world that are here that create tons of jobs were because he brought the best and brightest here. And by the way, the only folks, I have a lot of friends who are Native American who are actually native to this country are Native Americans. Everyone else is an immigrant. If you don't understand that, you're delusional.
All right,
so the only ones who could claim to be truly from here are Native Americans, and like they need to speak up more because everyone else is an immigrant and needs to basically accept that.
Let me have the last word on this, and then we're going to bring in Greg.
We're having fun.
I know, because we're not doing the news. We're just doing.
We're just like pontificating on a Friday.
Opinion. I mean, you're asking why has this happened in the last 20 years or the last even dozen years? And there are two answers. One is the limited information environment. We got rid of equal time. We got rid of all of the rules around news and around television in the mid-90s. Democrats did that, by the way. And then we followed that up with social media. So we live in an information environment today that's not unlike what's it's well on its way to becoming the information environment that exists in the Soviet Union. Or I'm sorry, in what is Russia. Sorry, Soviet Union. It shows you how freaking old I am. And anyway, I think, you create that kind of information environment. It's very hard to get in messages about infrastructure and education, because no one in the information environment is going to talk about it or is going to be rewarded for talking about it. So, that's a problem. We can no longer communicate with each other. It's very hard to discuss values and discuss what's happening in the world. And the other thing is nobody knows what's true anymore, so they get to choose what they believe is true. So there is, without an objective truth that we all agree on, there can be no objective solution.
Wait, can I just throw something in? The reason I started SynthBee is that science, tech, engineering has objective truth. And if you don't believe it, the plane you fly in, designed by someone who doesn't believe in that, is going to fall out of the sky or not take off. So there's physics and engineering and ground truth, which is not an opinion. And I think people, once they understand that, like all things flow from that. The reason we're doing this is because someone figured out physics and semiconductors. The reason we could fly is that someone figured out like physics and aerodynamics. So people that don't understand that are not going to have a really good place in the future. Because if you don't understand science, you can't build tech. Tech is where all the economy is going. So if you're just ignorant to that, that is not going to be helpful to you. Sorry for the diatribe again, Charlie.
all of that, very true. So we've got a new sponsor spot, which we're going to run right now for Vitcher before we bring in Greg. The guest segment of the AI XR podcast is sponsored by the new Luma series of Vitcher XR glasses. Vitcher is the quiet giant of video smart glasses, preferred by gamers and #1 in U.S. sales. The expanded 52-degree field of view shows me a virtual 152-inch screen. For the best in mobile gaming and entertainment, go to luma.vitcher.com or Amazon and get yourself a pair. All right, let's bring in Greg. Greg Shove.
Sir, how are you?
It's been a minute, Greg.
It has. Listen, I'm just so glad to be on a podcast with guys that are as old as me.
I know.
This
We
is
should
great.
change the name. We should change the name of our podcast to the Old as Dirt podcast.
Welcome
Yeah,
to the
totally.
club, Greg.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you're acquainted with my podcast partners, Roni Abovitz and Ted Shilowitz, but of course, I was singing your praises as we were doing the intro to the show, and we're very excited to have you here with us today. I can't wait to catch up.
Yeah,
Greg, Charlie,
likewise.
how long have you guys known each other?
I'm in over 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1996. So
Longer
yeah,
than probably a lot of our listeners have been alive.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that when you guys were 1 year old?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, there you go.
Exactly. Well, we were young relative to now.
Everyone was
30
young
years,
once.
30 years will do that to you.
Totally.
But fortunately on video softens the edges a little bit, so it's not quite as bad as it is in person.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, if you're going to live 1,000 years like some of the like tech CEOs, then you're still very young.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Greg. So we typically start with kind of a casual, tell us about yourself. Give us a little bio for our listeners to grow. This is what Roni calls ground truth. We like to sort of start with a sense of why you've joined us today and what was the path that led us to this day.
Yeah, great. Good.
So fire away. Tell us about yourself.
All right, yeah, sure. Okay, listen, my name's Greg Shove. I'm 63. I type with two fingers. And if I figured out AI, that means anybody else can. Basically, I have a typical Silicon Valley career, which is better than mediocre, but no unicorns. 7 startups as a founder or CEO, including 2 right now, 2 AI companies that I'm either the CEO of or the founder of. And I've got some total flameouts and 3 exits and, some stuff that I don't talk about. So, that's more typical, right? It's not what
Roni
you...
and I are in that same boat. So we're
Yeah,
So if
exactly.
you're like
I
a
think we all are.
280, so if you're a major league player, like batted 280,
Yeah, about
290 home runs,
Yeah,
got a Golden
exactly.
Glove 1 year.
Yeah, I got, maybe a Golden Glove. I don't know. I was on a couple of decent teams, and then
Played
had
for
a
the
late...
Brewers or the Twins
Yeah,
or
Well,
something.
I
Exactly.
remember when Greg joined AOL, we thought he was an all-star.
There you go. That was...
you sound pretty humble, Greg. So
Well, I'm Canadian, so I've got that chip.
yeah.
I've got that chip on my shoulder, especially these days. Now that we're going to be the 51st state,
Wouldn't you be so lucky?
Yeah, exactly. The joke I've been telling Canadians for 10 years, and somewhat seriously, is that eventually Canada will be part of the United States. I believe that it's inevitable. I believe at some point in the next couple generations, let's say 100 years, the water, the natural resources, the temperature, all of that will be too hard for an American president to resist. And my joke, so to speak, has been if you offered Canadians 2 NFL franchises, one in Toronto, one on the West Coast, you could probably get Canada. Because we're tired of driving to Detroit and Buffalo to see live NFL. And the CFL sucks. So I can't tell that joke anymore, at least not the past
Well, Canada's
six,
so
9
nice.
months.
They may just parse off part of Canada and say,
They
you know
could
what,
have-
you can have this part if you give
Exactly.
us 2 NFL teams.
Wait,
Right.
Greg, this is brilliant. Is all of this hullabaloo just about NFL franchises in Canada? Maybe that's the negotiation.
I think it is. No, I think that's all the Canadians really want, and really all you guys want, or all we want. I'm an American now. Is we're gonna need the water, and we're gonna need the cooler temperatures. So if you want the golf courses in Arizona to be green, you're gonna need Canada in 100 years.
Right. So you were involved in 7 startups, you said?
Yeah, I've done 7. I worked for 5 years in tech in Canada, and at which point I bumped into someone who said, "What the hell are you doing here? You can go to Silicon Valley. There's a grocery store in Palo Alto called Molly Stone's. You go to Molly Stone's on Saturday morning and get your groceries. You're going to meet more people in tech than you're going to meet, your whole life here in Canada."
That is a very correct thesis. Yes.
So I'm like, yeah, that was a good idea. So, we came to California to go to business school, and we stayed, and I went to Apple and started my first company as a spin out actually of Apple, and got very lucky in how I met Charlie. We got acquired before we ran out of capital, by AOL. And,
we were great
That
at
was
that.
aligned
We
with
were
Apple.
great
I
at
have, I
that.
have a similar story. So
yeah, and it was an online shopping company. Actually, we were back in the day, right? Apple was sort of really the innovator in what we would call interactive media, digital media. CD-ROMs.
Sure.
In this case, it was a catalog, a shopping catalog that you used your modem to place the order, which really meant that you probably actually emailed the order to us, and then we actually faxed it to the retailer, and they actually tried to fulfill it.
Greg, you just use a bunch of words that probably 80% of the folks we're talking to.
No idea.
Don't like fax, email, modem, CD-ROM. That's like saying
I know.
Brontosaurus, saber-toothed tiger,
Tyrannosaurus
telegraph
Rex
machine.
Yeah. I mean, the payoff of this story is when I was at AOL as head of e-commerce, Steve Case sent me to buy Amazon, and I met Jeff Bezos and offered $10 million.
wow.
And said,
That's a good story.
like selling books, really? Is this going to be that big? Books,
There's another cut to this story, but go on. I'll just add my perspective on that same story.
Wow. Okay.
And then, of course, we probably went back 3 times later, right? I offered $1 billion, $10 billion, whatever, and realized, no, this guy actually figured something out.
Did he give you a counter? Or he told you to just go pound?
Well, no way. He kind of said no way. And I said, well, listen, how about $3 million for a third of the company? Kind of like, hey, we'll be your investor. He's like, what are you talking about? If I'm getting capital, I'm getting it from the greediest motherfuckers. And they're on Sand Hill Road,
So they bounced Bezos over to Ted Leonsis to make an investment in the company through something AOL had called the Greenhouse.
Yeah.
So I showed up at, I guess this is like January 1996, and there's a big meeting with Bezos in Ted's office. So they grabbed me. I had no idea what was going on. I was just sort of another executive sitting there in the back of the room. And the deal on the table was Amazon was going to give AOL $1 million. AOL was going to get 15% of Amazon, and they were going to be the exclusive bookseller on AOL. That was the total deal. And it looked like it was a deal when Bezos left. And of course, all the executives stayed in the room. And there was a guy named Meyer Burlow who was in charge of advertising. And he said, Barnes and Noble, is going to make a deal with us and pay us $1 million in revenue, in advertising, not in some kind of weird round tripping way. And then whoever at that time was COO or head of corporate development was like, yes, God damn it, $1 million of revenue would change the course of this company. This is 1995. And so that was it. We didn't make the Bezos deal. And so I ran into Bezos at TED in like 1999.
Wow.
And I said, I don't know if he did not know who I was or remember any of it, but he said, hey, I will tell you this. If we had made that deal with AOL, Amazon would not be here today. So anyway, so that's the other end of that conversation with Bezos.
Sure.
And why, had AOL owned 15% of Amazon, they might still be in business today.
Totally.
Yeah, it's fascinating how just one or two little key moments in time, the trajectory changes. And
Yeah. I think, well, not to spend too much time on this, but I met with Len Riggio when Barnes & Noble launched their online store, and we had this deal with AOL. And his point of view was, I know the 40,000 titles that really sell. So I'm not going to load up the whole book catalog on the internet. I don't need to. That's a waste of time and money because I've got all the sales data. And I know, what people buy. And so I'll just load up 40,000 titles and I'll generate 90% of the revenue of Amazon and we will have a much better business. And I'm like, I don't know if you get it. Like it's all about choice, right? And I just think those moments where incumbents can't see what's about to happen, right? They're just so successful with what they're currently doing. Obviously we're in another one of those moments right now where, it'll sneak up on people fast, I think, in terms of, what they're doing that won't work as well. And I was thinking about it because I asked GPT, instead of Googling you guys, I asked GPT about you guys and the podcast. And it was just such a great example of sort of a better consumer experience, obviously in terms of no friction, and just how GPT's opinion about you was so influential to me. Right?
That's scary, isn't it? Because the thing hallucinates too.
Well, it
right?
hallucinates,
It's
absolutely makes
partially
mistakes.
accurate and partially crazy, right?
Oh yeah, and I think quite frankly, even scarier is some of these AIs. Well, all of them, but certainly some of the leaders like ChatGPT and Claude are run by just kind of basically a guy. I mean, these companies are run by one guy who increasingly we see evidence they want to tip the scale of how the AI answers. So we were promised impartial.
Grok.
Yeah, Grok, obviously, is a good example. And, Meta would clearly, if they could, do it if it was good for business, because
Yeah,
he's
they
a social.
definitely create their own influence sphere, whether
Yeah,
they realize
yeah.
it or not.
Yeah.
Mark went on and on about AI and superintelligence in his earnings call earlier in the week. We didn't get to that in the news segment. If we were actually doing a news segment today, we would have talked about it, because he's going all in on AGI, whatever the hell that is, as Roni has mentioned many times. But he's going all in and spending way faster than he spent on the metaverse, which, by the way, a word he hasn't said in like a year. His ranting was hugely rewarded in a way that none of the metaverse talk ever was.
Yeah, because there's real revenue. I mean, OpenAI is a 20 billion run rate. My guess is they'll exit Q4 at a 40 billion run rate. Anthropic's at a 5 billion run rate. I just invested in OpenAI as part of that SoftBank round, and I'm about to invest in the Anthropic round. When you look at the management presentations these CEOs are using to raise this capital, there's all kinds of fluff in them, but the numbers are staggering. Not just growth of users. 10% of humanity will be using ChatGPT by the end of the year.
Yeah, these are the new Googles and Microsofts.
Yeah, these revenue numbers are just the growth of these revenue.
They're getting a lot of users and a lot of sustained users, right?
Well, you said something like there was a promise of objectivity or something, Greg. Like, I guess, question for you: when did any of these CEOs actually promise that? I think that is not actually their promise. They are controlling. If you use this and you believe them, they control you. I don't think any of them promised to give us things that are objective or true. I don't think any of them are that.
Yeah, I think they did initially. I think if you go back 3-4 years ago, and even just a couple of years ago, these CEOs were talking about, AGI, artificial superintelligence, general intelligence, whatever it is. But I think they've been positioning these things as ground truths or sources of the world's knowledge without bias. Think about all the talk about taking bias out of AI 2 years ago. And again, no one mentions it now, right? So I do think initially this was sort of a giant sort of science experiment. First of all, to see if we could build an AI that worked. Now the science experiment is, and we're the lab rats. Now the science experiment is, can humanity thrive or not, right? With these tools and technologies kind of in our everyday lives, and what's the impact on our, livelihood and mental health and so on. I would agree with you now, where I think this is all about, a winner take all kind of business strategy, kind of moment,
I was at a conference where Sam Altman, Reid Hoffman, Elon Musk announced OpenAI, and they described what it was about more than a decade ago. And my initial thought was, I didn't believe anything anyone was saying. And they were going to say certain things to get people on board to believe what they put out would be objective and true, even though that wasn't the intent. So that when it's out there and they control what you're reading and seeing and learning, then you think it's objective and true, and you don't have that independent source of verification. Just believe what they say because they're controlling all sources of information. I call that computational autocracy. I actually think it's working. I think they have a very large percent, like you said, 10% of the population believe that what they're getting from them is objective and true. And what they're getting is a gigantic mix, a probabilistic mix of the internet, which is asymmetrically misinformative and not true. There's no truth filter or scientific method to filter. It's just the internet and this giant thing, and it blurbs out crap, and then they bias it the way they want. But people believe it's true. It's like supremely Orwellian. And somehow a good percentage of the population is going along with it and has stopped thinking and has stopped learning and has stopped being analytical. Sorry, we're on the diatribe, but I would just love to get your take on, that how you think things unfold? Like, how do people wake up from that?
I think they are unfolding that way. So, Ronnie, you're just more probably smarter and more cynical than I am. I was probably more naive 3 years ago around the intentions of these companies in building these sort of, truthful, unbiased, highly capable systems that we would benefit from. And I think we'll benefit from some of it. And I was probably buying into the into their hype that, listen, these systems can find things like cures for cancer and, and other problems that seem intractable, and we need the help. We need the cognitive help. I think the reality, though, is closer to what you're saying. And I think the reality is that most of humanity will cognitively offload to AI. And that is a very scary thing, because we need to cognitively offload. I don't think it's our fault. Meaning, we've always done this since the beginning of time. And humans used to be able to recite the Bible or the Quran or Homer's Iliad from memory, 70,000 lines of text. Now, it had to be trained to do it. But my point is, we've always cognitively offloaded because we need to. Our brains have not changed in 70,000 years. We lack enough cognitive energy to actually power our lives. So when we find tools, we basically, as a species, offload to them. And the mother of all cognitive offloading tools, right? We thought it was a smartphone. And it has been for the last 10 years. And that's why we can't find, our front door anymore without using GPS.
Yeah,
but
offload is a very interesting concept.
Yeah, we're about to do it. We're about to do it at scale.
Like, as kids and young adults, how many phone numbers did you know? And now flash forward to today, how many phone numbers do you actually know? And the factual sort of knowledge, I'm a trivia guy, trivia buff, right? Because I like to exercise my brain in that way. But I also realize the strong pull of that cognitive offload of, I don't know it, but man, do I have a device that does know it and can find it. Now, whether it's 100% true, especially in the age of AI, gets more and more dicey. And to all of your points, what you're obviously dancing around is maybe potentially the most overused mini diatribe around technology is, when it comes to technology, all forms of technology, if you don't know what the product is, you are the product, right? And there is nothing more true than that. That's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, that's right. So I worry most about this, which is that the vast majority of us will offload and frankly do something else with our time. Watch Netflix, spend another 30 minutes on TikTok, whatever it is, go walk the dog, take a yoga class. Cause it's going to be easier, and it's going to be easier to cut and paste from AI and hit send, than it will be to think for ourselves. And so I think for those who don't do that, I call them AI drivers versus AI passengers. Again, I think most of the population are going to be AI passengers, and that is scary. For those who are not, I think they get actually outsized advantage. Because they're going to use AI to be productive. Yeah,
what a great way to put it. AI drivers and AI passengers. That's nice.
And I think big tech wants us to be passengers. I agree, Ronnie.
We've seen this with social media too, right? There were a very few drivers and a huge amount of passengers, and that still exists today. And it's part of what the issue has become with that, right?
Well, actually, Greg, I would add one more. I love your driver passenger. I think there's you're being harvested first by AI in order to become a passenger and then to become unnecessary. So everyone who's working with, I'll give you an example. Let's say a marketing agency in Idaho is like using ChatGPT for 2 years to win campaigns. At some point, they've lost all their customers because they and thousands of others of small businesses have taught ChatGPT to do all their work. They got 2 years of jobs out of it, and then the jobs are all gone because those customers just use ChatGPT that sucked them dry. So right now you're being slurped like an orange until there's nothing left but a husk, and then so you're not a passenger or anything anymore. You've just been used, and there's not a place for you in that world. Like once it sucks your brain, it throws you away. So right now we're in the process, I would say 5 years of brain sucking individuals and companies.
Wow,
that's what they're doing.
I was looking forward to my weekend.
Like it's sucking your blood. No. This was going
to be the start of my weekend this morning. But this is maybe I need to start it earlier and go grab a drink.
It's funny because
the image of like a chat slurping you up like an orange and spitting you out is their business model. Once they have your data, know-how, insights, trade secrets, it's over. Right.
Okay.
And they are the largest economy players in the world. And that's the goal. And that's why they're valued so high. And that's what's happening.
I don't disagree. But what are we to do about that? Meaning, because let's go back to the marketing agency. Does the guy running or gal running that agency say no AI, or tell clients, no, I'm not going to serve you. If you ask me to do it with AI, we don't have it's a weird thing, right? We don't have a choice.
We do have a choice. No, we do have a choice. That's like saying, there are pharmaceuticals that actually cure cancer, and there's addictive drugs that are toxic. I think the population is being fed an addictive drug that is not actually good for them. Meanwhile, there's forms of AI systems and computing that could be really helpful to the world. We are currently being fed ones that are not helpful. It's like nicotine. It does something, but you're addicted to it, and it has a malevolent outcome. We're unaware of it. People are like just lured into it. We absolutely need it to cure cancer, to solve climate change, to do amazing things. These methods, these forms are not the ones we need. Absolutely. Like, we need one that protects that marketing agency so their business thrives for the next 20 years, is not sucked dry in 2. That's the dilemma.
So here's the thing, though. You can't detach AI from the information environment created by cable television and then social media and then mobile. You put those 3 things together, mobile, social media, and you have what is being done right now is the largest mind control and influence experiment ever carried out in the history of mankind. And we are doing it on a worldwide scale. We're conducting this experiment on 6 out of the 8 billion people on the face of the earth. And no one has any idea of what the possible outcomes could be, from good to bad.
Right.
We've never, and so into this very fraught, and might I add, fucked up situation, right? Because, Greg, if I had written a science fiction book in 2000 and said these things, people would have been like, oh, that book is crazy.
You'd be Neil Stephenson.
Yeah, you'd be Neil Stephenson.
And you wouldn't be on the podcast. You'd be going around islands and invited to Bezos.
I'd be going around talking about blockchain. Of course I would be.
Yes.
Okay, so very interesting topic of discussion. Greg, let's get back a little bit into your story.
I know we're supposed to talk about your company.
Let's get back a little bit into your story. So here's a 2-part question. Out of those companies that you formed, give us a little parable of the one that you absolutely thought was going to crush it, was going to get out to exit velocity, and what happened that it didn't. And then tell us about what you're super excited about now with your current venture and the things you're investing in and starting in now. And help us learn a little bit about your trajectory, what you learned from one of your failures and what you're learning now about what your next success will be.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've never had one of those rocket ship successes. I just haven't, so I either picked the wrong idea, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not lucky enough.
What was the one you thought would absolutely be it? And
I think I was probably, kind of QR code shopping before there were QR codes. And so Chris Anderson, who owns TED, Chris Anderson and I started a venture called See Me Buy Me, quite literally named, which was basically to make it easy for people in offline media to try to buy online. So very crude, early. And I thought it was a big idea, and it wasn't. We were like probably 15, 20 years too early, something like that. So this is the curse of entrepreneurship, right? Usually the issue is you're too early or your market's too small. What I'd say about my ventures, it's been all about pivots. It's been all about, starting in one place and then realizing that's not going to work out. And typically 2 to 5 years in. So you burn a few years capital and effort and so on. And then you got to figure out, okay, this is a better opportunity, which is what we've had. What happened with Section, the company I'm currently running. We were an online business school for 3 or 4 years. We thought we had an amazing product, and we spent a lot to build it. And of course, then I realized when the pandemic ended that our product was pretty good, but the pandemic, like it was for Zoom and Peloton, a lot of others, was driving a lot of demand because people are inside with nothing else to do. And I pivoted the company over 2 years ago. I pivoted the company February the 1st, 2023. And it was the day I spent a couple hours with ChatGPT Plus. And that's when I realized, okay, the only time I've ever made money in my career, the companies that have got exits have been ones that were positioned in some sort of wave, right? Some sort of growth, environment that had nothing to do with me. And that even if I executed sort of, mediocrely, or, if I executed well enough, the growth wave would pull me through. And that happened with
you're riding the trend.
Yeah, you're just right. Yeah. And that was e-commerce and, kind of early internet. That was a huge growth wave. And then, my last company, which became a $100 million ARR company, but it took way too long and too much capital, kind of rode that kind of, mobile, kind of enterprise mobile wave. And now, I'm hoping these two companies will ride this AI wave. It's just easier. And my advice to anyone, in terms of career advice, all young people and old people like me, is find growth. First of all, don't get focused on companies or categories or jobs. Focus first on the wave, the growth, and kind of just get in that wave. Somehow position yourself, in that momentum. And so that's what we've done with Section, and now with Machine & Partners, the other company that I launched last year. And so, we'll see how it works. But it feels like the timing's right. And, the hype is wearing off, and now CEOs are serious about AI now. They're serious about it because, listen, it's going to be more important to brag about capital efficiency in a couple of years. I think we've gone through it's been happening for sure for a while. But I think we have sort of shifted culturally in business at the leadership board level to where it's really better to brag about shrinking your company in terms of headcount than it is about than bragging about growth. We're going to brag about revenue growth. We always have. But I think leaders have sort of crossed over and said, listen, I want my RPE, revenue per employee, to be the best in my industry or category, right? And AI looks like, that's the solution to the sort of the RPA game, which is obviously in terms of driving down headcount over the next couple of 3 years. And I think that's what's going to start to happen.
So what can you tell us about these two ventures that you're in? Explain what those verticals are, what you're doing with them.
Sure. So Section was an online business school, and then we became an online AI school. And then that business, the last couple of years, has continued to evolve into we're in basically a transformation consulting firm for companies deploying AI to their workforce.
Got it.
So our customers are large organizations, typically 100 employees at the low end, but more likely 1,000 to 10,000 employees. And they've basically signed their LLM license. So they've signed a 1 or 2 or 3 year contract with OpenAI for ChatGPT for Enterprise, or Microsoft Copilot, or Google Gemini, something like that. And they're ready to deploy this LLM into every employee's hands with the expectation they're going to get some sort of significant 10, 15, 20% productivity gain in a year or two, and then start either hiring freezes or in fact shrinking headcount. So that's kind of the best customer for us, because hopefully they realize that it's not going to be easy. And we can talk more about that, because getting employees to use AI is really hard for all kinds of reasons, one of which is anxiety and resistance. But, and this is not software. The real challenge here is that most people buy AI, buy an LLM thinking it's software. And obviously it's not. It doesn't behave like software. As Ronnie said, it sort of hallucinates. It's unreliable. It's magical in moments, and it's clownish in its behavior in other moments. And so if we deploy it like software, we're going to fail. And that's what's kind of been happening the last couple of years.
Ronnie has a lot on that.
Yeah, Greg, question for you. How do you deal with, you mentioned the employee anxiety. I think the revenue per employee, totally agree with, is where almost all CEOs are going. But I think there's the CEOs that think I'm going to 10x my company, and there's CEOs that I'm just going to cut my company in half and kind of look good that way. I think the CEOs who do the cut in half, those employees are going to have very real anxiety and very real paranoia. And I bet you the rejection rate of AI is supremely high. I think only of the companies that are trying to 10x will you see the employees embrace it, because it's like committing employment suicide. At some point, everyone's going to realize, if I teach this thing my job, but there's no growth path, where I become a manager of these things, then why am I doing this? It's like the Uber drivers, were revolting when I think Travis or somebody said at some point, you're teaching our AI how to replace you. And they're like, that was a huge revolt. And guess what? It's 2025, and that's not happened. And I think
it's happened. It's
not
happened
for Uber.
Yeah, I hear you. But living in San Francisco, we just moved to San Francisco. Call us crazy. We used to live down on the peninsula in the Palo Alto area. But yeah, I've been in Waymos and Ubers a lot the last 3 weeks. And the Uber drivers are pretty clear-eyed about it when you talk to them about it. They're like, yeah, we won't have this job for much longer. So I'm doing it while I can, and leasing my Tesla.
So you think they're in the acceptance, the grief is over?
Yeah, I think the grief is over. And listen, yeah, I hear you, and I think you're right. Here's how I think about it. First of all, I think AI, kind of enterprise AI, goes in a couple waves, right? And I call it the cut and create. The cut wave and the create wave. So Ronnie, you kind of referenced this. So the cut phase is what we're in now, which is make everything more efficient, right? Lower our OPEX, which means for software companies and tech-first companies or tech-enabled companies, that usually means headcount, right? Because that's typically the biggest part of OPEX. The create phase comes later. It always comes later because it's harder and the ROI is much less clear. The cut phase comes faster because everybody knows how to, to lay off people and make things more efficient. And you can see the ROI. The CFO can okay, yeah, I'll sign off on that, right? The create phase, which is create new products, create new services, create new revenue, 10x the business, kind of grow. That's always harder, always takes longer, and the CFO is more skeptical. So we need to get through this cut phase, quite frankly, in terms of enterprise AI. It is what's happening. It's unstoppable. The genie's out of the bottle. And if your competitor's doing it, you probably don't have a choice, so to speak. And my advice to leaders, and it's a good question, Ronnie, my advice to leaders is, try to be honest. It's hard, especially if you run a large company or a public company. Because you basically have to say one thing one day and the next day you say something else, right? That's just the reality of a public company CEO. But sort of my talk track is in a year, some teams will be bigger, some teams will be smaller, and some teams will stay the same size. The ones that are bigger because AI made them more valuable and we actually need more of them. Sales is the best example. If you can make a salesperson more productive and have a higher chance of hitting quota with AI, which is unproven, but that's the hope, right? You're going to want more salespeople, right? And in the call center, if humans can do twice as many calls or you don't need many humans, and you're going to have less humans in the call center. And that's why every Fortune 500 goes there first because we care least about those people. And we already outsourced them and offshored them. So we probably, we've already kind of moved down the path of making those people, kind of less relevant to organizations. And then some teams will be the same size and just working more, working more, meaning being more productive.
Greg, one more question. I know we're going to run out of time soon, but what do you do? And I don't know if one of your businesses is doing this in terms of reskilling and upskilling. I think there's a massive opportunity of people who may not fit in that future company, but there's an opportunity to take that person and reskill them, upskill them for something in that company or somewhere else. But a lot of people are going to need that. And it's not necessarily going back to college, but something has to help them, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's
who's doing that?
Yeah, a lot of people are, and that's what Section does. The company I'm the CEO of, and that's you got to upskill everybody to get them ready to use these AIs. And I think as a CEO, you have a responsibility to be doing that because you are going to move some of those people out of your org likely in the next 5 years, if not in the next year or two. And I think you owe them at least. Putting them back into the job market with these AI skills. So my advice to every CEO is tell the truth, in terms of you're not sure how it's going to go down in each team, but this is the likely change happening. And that at the very least, they'll be upskilled by you. You'll pay for it as the CEO. And so when they hit the job market, they're going to be better off. My advice to everybody is be in the top 25% of your team. Like you need to be a top performer right now and you need to get your own AI skills. And by the way, if the company's not upskilling you, that's not an excuse. And if you want to put your head in the sand, you better be 60 years old. Because, or at least 55. If you can see the golf course in your sights, okay, fine. Stay in the sidelines and head to the golf course.
If you're unemployed at 55, you're not going to find another job and you're going to use your savings paying for health insurance until you qualify for Medicare.
Yeah, that's fair.
No one will give a full-time job to a 55-year-old man. No matter who you were, no matter what you did. That world is gone unless you want to put on a vest at Home Depot.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I guess I was influenced by my friends. I see them all, getting golf lessons. And so, but yeah, I agree. Everybody else, get these skills. And if the company's not upskilling you, that's not an excuse. This is not hard. I mean, it's funky. Like these technologies are weird to work with, but they're immensely powerful. And a GPT license is $20 a month or whatever. And, go on YouTube and watch some videos and start playing around with it. And by the way, play around with it at home. If your company's sort of not really encouraging AI use, and they weren't the last couple of years because of data, privacy, security concerns, again, not an excuse. Like use AI to plan your travel and as a medical second opinion or something, or get parenting advice from GPT. Learn how to use these things.
Can I throw out one more thing, Greg? What is your view on not learning an AI skill, learning a job AI won't do? Like the vest at Home Depot, a plumber, electrician, where your body and presence in the world matters. Because I think learning how to use ChatGPT is probably less valuable for some people than learning how to be a plumber. ChatGPT is not going to be like, underneath your sink fixing it. That might be a job that pays more than an analyst at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah,
because the analyst at Morgan Stanley will be done by a computer that costs like $1,000. That plumber may be charging you like hundreds of dollars per hour. So I'm wondering, do people actually have to move away from these fields of like knowledge and into like the blue collar skill where you need people to do that, and you'll kind of have that roles to fix. That seems like a safe zone for people, I think.
In many ways, the people who get to do that will be lucky. I'll give you an example. My stepniece went to Chapman, where I'm a professor, and she got herself a degree in film editing and was freelancing around in Los Angeles as an editor. But she could barely get enough work every quarter to keep up her health insurance. And so finally she had an opportunity to go into an electrician apprentice program. Now she makes twice as much money. She has as much work as she wants.
That's the future.
She's got savings. She owns a car.
And
it's like everything she wanted, but she couldn't have from her other job. So,
I think you're describing the future, which is blue collar work is the safe haven. White collar work is the red zone.
Yeah, I think that's right. Listen, I think we should think about this as, let's be optimistic and say that these technologies will create new and more jobs. That has been the history of innovation, right, in terms of the technology innovation. But, that doesn't mean it's going to be this time. But let's assume optimistically it will be this time as well, in terms of we'll create net new growth in the economy, which would also include, again, optimistically, job growth. At a minimum, though, it will take 10 years. Like the transitions are hard, and we've always been bad at the transitions. Every economy is, because you don't manage the economy, right? So let's assume it takes 10 years. I do think if you're entering the workforce now, or at an age where you can still pivot into something that AI can't do, I think you should take a hard look at that. If you're willing to live off, let's say, $150,000 or $200,000 a year, which might be the upper income level of a plumber, electrician these days, at least in a big urban market, if that's good for you, then yeah, that might be the right call. Again, hopefully, optimistically, in 10, 15 years, we get through the transition. We'll start to see these new knowledge economy jobs created. But certainly, if you're going to go to college right now and leave with $40,000 of debt and go work, at the Apple Genius Bar, I'm just not, maybe the Genius Bar, because you're actually in person. But you get my point. A lot of these knowledge economy jobs are sort of in that 75 to 150,000 range. And this is what AI is exposing. We're paying a lot of people to move data around and cut and paste documents and, create decks. And, that's sort of the dirty little secret of knowledge work. A lot of it's not that valuable, quite frankly. And it's been sort of moving information around inside the organization. And those teams are going to be smaller. And again, unless you're so confident in yourself that you will be in that top 25%, because we're going to need people. And we're going to need managers of the AIs, and there's going to be work, but I think less of it, certainly in this transition phase. And it feels like to me it's a 10 plus year, maybe longer transition phase. That's optimistically that we will create more jobs over time versus we sitting around home picking up our UBI check, which is also a fantasy.
So, this is of course, opening up a whole new line of conversation, but we have to wrap up the show. So Greg, it's great to see you. I'm going to email you so you and I can have a proper catch up. I would love to talk about the past 30 years and the next 30 years.
But don't wait 30 years to meet up again, Charlie.
I also want to know if Scott Galloway is running for president. Yes or no?
I have no idea. I'm about to jump on a call with him, so I'll ask him.
Give him my best. I have a lot of respect for that guy. Thank you for coming. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back here next Friday.
See you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.